As I dive deeper into the hidden realities of what it is to be a solopreneur, I'm coming up with a lot of different things that essentially remind me of client experiences that I've had in the past. And I've had all different types of clients. I've had large companies, I've had global companies where I've done work for them, like qualitative research. And then I have the smaller family-owned businesses. It's run the gamut. And it's so funny because when I get in front of people and they say, oh, what industry do you work in? I'm like, I kind of dabbled in all of them because my focus is the person and the brand and their identity. And that's what made me think of today's episode, which is really about dealing with the fears that come up when you're a solopreneur because you don't have an identity as a solo. You're coming off of corporate or working for a company or doing a job that your identity was always associated with that company and your role. And it's really a big transformation to go from that into solopreneurism. So that's what I want to explore in this episode and hopefully give you some tips on how you can look at that differently so you're more empowered by that search for identity as a solopreneur. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. When I was thinking about this topic, it was really driven by the conversation around creating an identity. And in the work that I do a lot of work with personal branding, coming up with positioning statements, messaging. So what a solopreneur is doing in their business resonates with their target client. Basic marketing 101 kind of languaging and coming up with the right nomenclature and wording that is clear and gets the point across so you can make those connections that much faster. And it all starts with what is your position and who are you and what are you doing? What I want to point out before I get into this is this fear will come up throughout your solopreneur journey. Whether you have just been laid off a job, took a riff, or just you're done with corporate and you want to strike out on your own, whatever's putting you out into the solopreneur universe is something that's calling you from deep within. And what I want to do is I want to explore that because this identity thief is always going to be attached to fear and lack and worry and whatever drives your anxiety. The reality of being a solopreneur is you don't have a lot of feedback. It's not always as helpful as having a more well-rounded feedback mechanism so you can see yourself from different angles. But a lot of that comes from the way we worked professionally in whatever job we had, whatever career trajectory we had in the corporate world, whatever that was, our identity was shaped by that company's brand or by that profession, by that career path. Like I'm an engineer, I'm a communications person, I'm a doctor, I'm a therapist, all these different labels that put you in your mind and your identity in a bucket, regardless of where you started in your career and how you journeyed. If you are coming into being a solopreneur, if you have been a solopreneur, that fear, which some people call it imposter syndrome, I don't think that that's really as accurate as it could be. I think it's because when we're solopreneurs, we don't go through the exercise of mining, defining, and communicating what our identity is as a solopreneur. And I think the reason that we may do that is because we're not really connected to who we are and what we want to do. That's a big one. And that takes a lot of self-examination, exploration, and trust that you can be successful doing something you're passionate about and that you're really interested in. Whether it's cause related, like I want to make a better ecosystem for the Everglades or something like that, or I want to help the homeless or something that's cause related. But what you're doing in the world has to be connected to your identity. And many solopreneurs don't take the time to do that. The other thing is we come out of corporate or our profession, whether you work for corporate or just small mom and pops throughout your career, you did something and you got into new jobs as you progressed, as your resume grew, doing similar things. And most people follow a pretty standard trajectory of doing the same work. I'll give you an example. I graduated art school. I wanted to be a graphic designer. I wanted to be in commercial art. I wanted to be in the business of art and the communication aspect around doing creative. I had a lot of creative talent, but I loved business. Still do. I love business. So that's why I went to the school that I went to and got the degree that I got and polished it off with Georgia Tech and got some more technical work. So I could do the geeky part as far as like building, and then I could also do the conceptual creative. And my whole journey of jobs up until I was laid off from Marriott and started my business were all related to communications, whether it was tactically creating something like typography or laying things out. I worked for a newspaper, I worked for a printing company, and then I went and worked for an ad agency. And then I went on the client side and I ran their web team. And I did that for a couple businesses. And then the last one was running the web team for Marriott Vacation Club, which was their timeshare arm, which has since been sold off. Anyway, sometimes I just say Marriott and it's really Marriott Vacation Club. So very different. Timeshare was pretty big in Orlando and not so much anymore, but it's still a viable industry. I always saw myself doing that. And I was lucky enough to be able to execute my creative energies and interests and passion and grow those skills over my 40-year career in different kinds of jobs and now as a solopreneur. And what I'm seeing in the marketplace as far as the people that come to me who are referred to me or that I meet and we talk about what they're doing and they want to be a professional speaker or they want to start a training company or they want to be a consultant. There's a lot of different mechanisms or ways you can take your expertise and put it out into the public marketplace. What I find interesting, and this is kind of a niche thing, is lately I've been running into a lot of very, very experienced executives who are being riffed from companies because in today's economy, a lot of these larger corporations are downsizing. They're getting rid of a lot of middle management that's got bloated salaries, been with the companies for a long time. And they're needing to do this in order to compete. So it's always a dollar decision, not a human decision. My prediction is that they're going to realize that that was probably a big mistake. Understandable, because the quality of inexperience comes at a cost. As these experienced folks get pushed out into the marketplace, they have a decision to make. They either get another job or they start their own business. Or there's probably little nuances of different things that they could do as well. But my experience is when the executive comes out of corporate, they face that decision, and let's say they want to be a consultant. And they've always consulted in the area of sales in healthcare, for example. Just pick one of a million. They have no experience in rainmaking or pipeline management. They have no experience in doing any kind of branding or communications, or they have no clue. They've always been identified as their role in that company. They've built their network around that role and that company's brand. And so when they go, and I find this quite often, when I encounter these consultants, there's a lot of them that have really deep networks and they're well known for what they did in corporate, and many are hanging out their own shingle and bringing all that experience and network with them to serve other companies doing very similar work that they did inside of that corporation or throughout their career. Now, what's great about that is they have that deep bench of experience. They know people. They understand the inside wiring of a lot of companies, and they will be pulled into a competitor to do consulting. But what that competitor wants is the inside scoop on what their competitor is doing, which is where this consultant used to work. So you can kind of see how a consultant who really hasn't created their own brand or identity can struggle, because they're basically peeling off a shingle of the roof of the corporation they worked with, and they're hanging that shingle out as their brand. And the reason why that doesn't have the sustainability of making that consultant's business grow and last and really create something unique is what they're doing, or what they were doing in that corporation, is old news. They're not bringing a lot of fresh perspectives. They're not taking the opportunity to find that gap or gaps in the business ecosystem that they were exposed to. Because when you work for a corporation, believe me, we all have been there, most of us anyway. We've all been there, and we know what that company that we worked for is doing wrong, or missing the mark, or not focusing on, or whatever, and what their weaknesses are. And so that's what those competitors want to exploit. So that's one thing that consultant gets abused around. The other side of the coin is, because they're basically saying, this is what I did for XYZ company, and I'm out here doing it on my own, so I'm really experienced, and they're basically borrowing that label or that role and putting it into their own business. And what that can do is that can muddy the water as far as how you communicate about what you do. Then you end up just sounding like a little version of that corporation, which is not going to help you in the long term. I see so many of these consultants come out and they hire somebody on the cheap to build a quick website, or they might try it on their own because there's a lot of do-it-yourself website tools out there. And they end up crafting the copy like corporate speak because that's what they're used to. They end up using stock photos of handshakes and people smiling and that kind of stuff. And believe me, I don't have anything against stock photos, but I'm all about authenticity, transparency, and being a real human being, especially in the age of AI. And they throw something together and they think they're the bomb because they have this very corporate-looking presence, but there's no identity of who they are. I can barely find a photo of them, or even if they went in with somebody else and there's two people in the consultancy, very little about who they are. And when I do find it, it's like it was lifted right from the corporate speak. What I find frustrating about that is I don't think that a lot of these folks who go out on their own realize that they have a golden opportunity to create a really powerful, sustainable, niche, and stand apart brand, because it's so noisy out there and they have no signal. They have a borrowed signal from their corporation. They try their best to go out and ride on the coattails of their reputation in that arena, that industry, or that network. They may get some work and it may be fine for a couple of years, but long term, because they're not pursuing developing their own vision, their own brand, their own identity, because they have the freedom to do that, but they either don't know how or they don't feel confident in that because it's so distinct from the corporate offerings, from what they think their ideal clients will want. That fear will creep up at any time during a solopreneur's journey. So if you start out your business as a consultant, for example, and you're borrowing on the credibility that you built in your professional career working for some other company, and you take that experience and those degrees or those brand names, like I worked for IBM, or I worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield, or I worked for this hospital, or I worked for that manufacturer, or I did this. That's just borrowed credibility. I don't want to dismantle your journey. I don't want to do damage to that. That is a beautiful foundation that not only supported you and helped you hone your skills and give you the experience, but keeping that in the same message, trying to extend that as a solopreneur is going to have a limited lifespan. Let's say you're 5 years out of the corporation. Well, the law of diminishing returns will tell you that eventually you'll become old news. And unless you're working really hard at your ability to stay on trend, to understand what's going on in that particular industry or your expertise, you're going to find a lot of challenges and you're going to become less and less relevant. There's obviously exceptions to this. I'm trying to be general because the point I'm trying to make is there are so many fears associated with creating your own identity and standing for that identity and understanding your temperament if you're really cut out for being a solopreneur. If you have the ability to be courageous and develop your own identity, then that is something that you can build on, you can grow, you can leverage your network and your experience to point out those gaps. And that's really where I want to focus is when you were in those corporate roles. I know that you discovered certain things that your corporation, your team, your whatever industry was overlooking or not doing well, or you saw opportunities to capitalize on an aspect that was underserved in the marketplace. And that's where solopreneurs become incredibly powerful, like surgeons. And you can take that expertise of your whole career and find that gap and address it in a way that gets you excited, that you know that there's clients out there that are struggling with that very thing, may not even know that they're struggling with that thing, which is your job to point that out. And some of the most successful people as solopreneurs, if they're able to do that, they do great, right? They grow their business, they may hire people, they may turn it into a big company, or they just stay solo with a small team. Whatever it looks like depends on how they want to be the captain of that ship. These are some things that I want you to think about when it comes to the fear of going out on your own, creating your own identity, and then presenting that brand and that identity and that offering to the marketplace with confidence, with courage, and with the ability to really solve a very distinct problem that you're passionate about. Let's take a look at some of these things. It's funny because I've talked about this one particular client that I had, and we did a KISS marketing map together. But because he couldn't make the leap from where he was and what he did to being a solopreneur, as far as like the value proposition that he had, he just ran out of steam. He couldn't take that KISS marketing map and execute it because he was not identifying with the vision that came out of the KISS marketing map, which everything that was in it came from him. And that's what's so magical about doing these strategies is it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and lay this out for you and this is where you should go. No, it's driven by their input, their personality, their temperament. It's a pretty cool process to go through. He's still stalled out. He still hasn't really decided what he wants to do, whether he wants to go ahead and pursue being a solopreneur or not. And then there's another group that they just don't even want to consider. They just can't see themselves not working in a company. And I've met those people and I've worked with those people. And I just want to stress this. There is nothing wrong with staying employed and going from job to job and building a nice career, working for other companies. You're obviously bringing value. If you're enjoying it, if you feel you're exercising your gifts and talents, if it's challenging your brain and making you grow and learn new things, there is nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I've gone back into the workforce periodically throughout my entire solopreneur life, just kind of in weird ways. You know, either a client hired me for a short time or I focused on this one particular gig, like when I worked for AAA for a couple of months to help them transition their platform. And there's nothing wrong with that. So deciding to be a solopreneur is very courageous, but you have to trust that what you've built in your life from the standpoint of your skills and the value you can bring to others is strong enough and distinct enough that you can create your own identity. It doesn't need to be, oh, I'm Tom Smith and I worked for Apple corporate in California and I did this and now I'm out on my own doing that. It doesn't have to be the coattails of that brand. That may help you get started, but eventually you're going to need to identify what it is you do really well. I did this in my business. I started out just kind of doing the same thing I did at Marriott. And when I kind of figured out where the gaps were in the marketplace, meaning what my clients were mostly either struggling with or just completely missing the mark on, which is what was really going on with their ideal clients and customers, that's when I started doing qualitative research. And that's when I came up with the Better 3 model: better understanding of your customer, better communications, more professional, and then better relationships. So you get lots of natural referrals and people become advocates of your business. And that model still to this day is incredibly successful because I noticed a gap. I created an identity that is Terry Pappy, that is my business, Better 3. And I developed it in such a way that not only fulfills me, but it's a great way for me to move forward in the business and grow and shift and see and adapt to what's going on in the marketplace. And right now, there are more solopreneurs being born every day because of the corporate riffing and basically getting rid of a lot of the middle management with extensive experience because of bloat. And then what they're doing is these people are deciding, hey, I can build a website. I can, I've got a great network. I'm going to get out there and start doing my own thing. And that's fantastic. This is why I'm doing this show. I want to support you and those folks that are out there trying to figure it out on their own. But I will tell you this, the identity thing is a critical part. So let's get into what you can do to start peeling back the onion and discovering what it is that makes your offering and you very unique. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to start by making a list of all of the things that you bring to the table. And these are in the context of solutions. And so I'll use myself as an example. Obviously, I help people understand what their strategy is and how to approach communications. I help them develop a brand and messaging. So there are tactical deliverables. But what's underneath that is, what am I really giving that client? I'm giving them clarity. I'm giving them purpose. I'm giving them direction. And I'm giving them confidence. And they all get it because I'm laying it out based on what they gave me. So it has everything to do with what they're willing to put out there and develop for themselves. And then they have to step into that. And that's the tricky part. When you have identified what it is that makes you truly unique and what you're excited about and what you're passionate about, plus all of your experience, like when you were in corporate and you had your annual review, what were they telling you that you did really well? What were they telling you that you needed to work on? And those are things of how other people see you and how they are evaluating you. But when you're a solopreneur and you're looking at creating your own identity, the field is wide open. And all you have to do is just take a look at what you enjoy, at what you really bring to the table. And if you need to reach out and ask some of your clients, where and how did I bring the most value? What did you like about working with me? This is the kind of stuff I do with qualitative research. If my clients don't want to go direct and ask, because sometimes their clients can be a little weird about being honest, I can always get everybody to be honest. It's one of my secret powers. And find out, just do that self-examination. Find out exactly what it is that you love to do that makes you unique, and then find a way to communicate that. This is the most important thing. In the age of AI, it's going to be very challenging to come across authentically as a human and to really convey your value in such a way that people will lean in and want to talk to you and want to hire you. When you portray yourself in such a way that is something that will feed that, because we're going to get more and more of a demand for that human touch, that human experience, human to human, and the kind of service that is not robotic. There is a place for AI, there's a place for robots, there's a place for all that. If it can help us with the minutia, the repetitive tasks, the speed up the thinking and the delivery of our services, whatever, that's what AI is for, at least for now. But I will tell you what, we're going to have more and more hunger for that human experience, that authenticity, that real vulnerable expression of, yeah, I get it. I'm right there with you. The empathy, all the things that right now AI cannot convey, at least in a way that reaches us. So when you're looking at having a fear around being successful as a solopreneur, it will always be tied to your identity and how you're creating your own brand. Once you've gone through and made that list, step back and look at what your clients are really struggling with. Where are the gaps? This is where you kind of do a market assessment. And it doesn't need to be like a SWOT diagram, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You don't need to get all that technical about it. You need to really just trust your gut. And I am such a big believer in intuition and trusting your gut and all of that, that it's so important to really feel and know what the human beings in the ideal client that you want to work with are dealing with. What is their environment? What are some of their threats? What are some of the things that they're frustrated with? What are they afraid of? And when you are able to identify what those things are, then you can see some patterns. What I used to do was I would take a list of clients that I really enjoyed working with, that had a lot of success, like my top 20%. I would look at where the patterns were. What made it successful? What made that client trust me? What made that client open to the ideas that I was offering? What made them see that what we were doing was not only right, but effective and got results? And I took those things and I put them kind of like in this package. I was able to create messaging, to talk to prospects in such a way that what I did came across clearly and that resonated with them. And if it didn't resonate, then that was not a good fit client for me to work with. Those are two areas that you want to start peeling back and exploring. You look at that list of things, you create that kind of winning formula that you provide. And if you're just starting out, just look at where you had a lot of success in the corporate world if you don't have a lot of experience with clients yet. But you want to understand, where are you really having the most effect? Where are you noticing the biggest gap? How are you looking at it? Or what type of light are you shining on it that they're going, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Or, oh, wow, that can be a huge differentiator for me. Or that can be an amazing solution to this problem that we've suffered from for decades. That's the magic of that identity. And when you pull all that together, and it is helpful because, and I suffer from this problem myself, with all the work that I do with my clients, I have the hardest time doing it for myself. And everyone has this problem from the standpoint of how they see their business. And this is why I love working with clients who have that same challenge. They can't see the real value that they're putting forth. When we work together, we're able to discover what that is, and then I help them communicate it in such a way that resonates with their prospects and clients. That's where the magic is really leaning into identifying what that secret sauce is. What is it that lights you up, but also is of incredible service in the marketplace, that you not only enjoy delivering, but your clients absolutely fall over themselves with joy because you're able to solve the kind of problems that they've never been able to solve, or that they were never aware that they had. And that's the real key. If you can show them and say, listen, you've got a problem over here, and they're like, no, we don't. And like, let me show you and explain what I mean. And then they're like, oh man, It's like having a handyman come to your house and you say, okay, I need this light fixed. And they look up and see that the light is improperly wired. Well, you wouldn't have been able to identify that because you're not an electrician. And so that way, that issue can be resolved. And then you feel, oh my gosh, my house could have burnt down with that bad wiring. I don't know if that's the best example, but my analogy engine is in need of some caffeine, I think. Once you go through that exercise of really stopping and taking a look at what lights you up, that's when you can really discover the power of creating your own identity, your own definition, and clearly messaging what that is to your clients so it resonates. It may be one thing in your mind, like I'm this, but you have to be able to communicate it in such a way that your prospects and your target clients understand. They go, oh, wow, they do that? That's pretty cool. I want to learn more about that. Whatever that is, either talking about what problem you solve in a very unique way or presenting yourself as this identity that is something that nobody else is doing. There's only one you, and you're here to do these things. But if you're not taking the time to discover what that is for yourself, as a solopreneur, you're missing a huge opportunity to live a much more fulfilling life. And I'm going to leave you with this one last tip. Use AI. I highly recommend you have conversations with one of your favorite AI tools, whether it's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, regardless. Let that AI tool get to know you. Talk about what you did, where you did it, what problems you see. Have these conversations back and forth in one chat thread. Let the AI hear what you're saying, understand, and ask it questions. Have it prompt you for different things. Talk about the marketplace. This is an incredibly powerful tool to use to help you reframe how you see yourself, to get ideas that you may not have ever considered, and to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, I'm not myopic anymore. I see myself because I've been having this conversation with AI. So I highly recommend that you deploy AI to help you kind of sort this out. And it can be fun too. Like I go on walks and I have conversations with Gemini and I enjoy it. And what's great about it is, and this is my favorite part about it, you can be so honest and so vulnerable and so snarky or humorous or pissed off, and the AI will actually capture that and it'll get to know your personality. That's the most powerful tip I can give you out of all this, because I don't want this to come across as work or an assignment or you're doing it wrong, because as a solopreneur, you're doing it perfectly as it should be because you're a solopreneur and you have the freedom and flexibility to let go of those coattails, to let go of that role that you had, that identity that you borrowed, and start defining and identifying the brand that you want to portray, the brand that's really you, the brand that speaks to you from deep within, and get out there and just do what you're meant to do. Live your life's purpose. Help others in the way that you truly want to through the gifts and talents that you've been born with and that you've cultivated throughout your career. Because I'm telling you, people need you, your unique perspective, and what you're up to matters. So get out there and build that brand. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt. If this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one. Bye.